All right, so today we're doing the chapter on enculturation, and it's kind of like a fancy cultural anthropology term, which really we would, in a theological sense, we would call it indoctrination. And around the world, in different cultures, young children are enculturated, or you could say indoctrinated, into the norms, values, and ideals of the society or group in which they live, the culture in which they live, hence enculturation. And so that interview with those young children I showed you, even by the age of 3, they're saying children have this like gender identity and the stereotypes that go with it that have been imposed upon them from their culture. Now, these aren't innate things, like they were asking questions like, who cleans the house, who goes to work? That has nothing to do with biology, right? That has to do with cultural norms and expectations. And if those young children being interviewed were from another culture, they might have had different stereotypical answers to what the gender roles of males and females happen to be, or masculine, feminine. We talk about as gender as opposed to male, female being biological sex. That movie I showed you, the documentary Jesus Camp, it was such a great example of enculturation slash indoctrination. And in the chapter on enculturation, they talk about different stages of life, from like infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and then old age. And when we talked about gender roles in that chapter, we saw that even at the different stages, we have different norms and expectations for male and female infants. We dress them differently. We buy them different types of clothes. We read them different types of storybooks. We get them different types of toys. It's amazing. And I've raised both female and male offspring. And even my parenting was so different on how I raised the boys in my family from how I raised the girls. And it was like a reinforcement of the way I was raised. Men were taught, or boys were taught, to be strong, to be brave, to be bold, to be adventuresome. And the little girls were taught to be like sweet and gentle and kind and nurturing. And we would reinforce those behaviors in the young females and reinforce the masculine behaviors in the males. But once again, that is like being imposed upon them from the outside. And I'm not trying to say if that's right or wrong, good or evil. I'm just saying that's the reality of how children are brought up or enculturated into a group. And so they are going to get with it, not just the gender stereotypes, but also the presuppositions, the biases, the prejudices are going to be part of that enculturation. Well, we have a lot of racial tension and unrest going on in the country right now, and this would tie into that. Racism does not just happen. It's not like this innate property into our heads. That has to be enculturated and taught. We have to be taught to be wary of certain groups or certain types of people. Or now what is, I think, perhaps innate is this idea of xenophobia. And that means, phobia is fear of, and xeno is the other. So xenophobia is literally a fear of others, people that don't look like us, think like us, talk like us, believe like us. And so that, I think, may be part of the human condition, but then layer upon layer of enculturation is put on top of that to give us reasons why we don't hang out with certain people, why we don't go to certain parts of town, why we don't associate with certain groups, etc. And so basically, those are the only terms you need to know for this chapter, is to know the difference between infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age, and the different corresponding rights and expectations that go with each stage. And then the term enculturation itself, which is putting the norms, values, and ideals of your culture onto the young to bring them up in that same model. And so I know that's a short explanation, But watch the videos, and we're going to talk about those as we go. Okay.